Amin, Amin, Rabbil Alameen. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Amran Mohammed, the Managing Director of ISI, the Director of Kalam Research and Media, KLIKS Southeast Asia, to give his welcoming speech to this workshop. Tfaddal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adila. It's not opening, welcoming speech. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajma'in. Allahumma aftah alaina hikmatak wa mishra alaina min khazaini rahmatik ya arhamar rahimin. Yang berbahagia, Datin Profesor Dr. Azizan Baharudin, Director General IKIM, and also my previous boss in University of Malaya. I've been with her in various assignments in University of Malaya, and I still regard her as my sister, big sister. Our learned and beloved Professor Dr. Aref Ali Naid, Syekh Dr. Said Fuda, yang berbahagia Dr. Hamid Fahmi Zarkashi, Deputy Director Universitas Darussalam Gontor, my dear friends, colleagues, and all the participants. I regard this event, this workshop, as a family program. When we did the first inaugural workshop on Kalam Epistemology, I think 2 months ago, less than 2 months ago, we decided to have like very small meeting for maybe 20 people. But when we received requests from others, so we have to open up the event, so it became like maybe 40 or 50 people. But the program should meant for us a very close discussion on the issue which is very important, epistemology. In our effort to bring back Kalam, or we want to do Ihya Ilmul Kalam, I think epistemology is the basis for our movement. That's why we think we need to develop a core group of epistemologists. And we hope here we can maybe develop around 20 to 30 people or 30 epistemologists who really delve into the issue of knowledge in Islam, particularly from Kalam perspective. Although we know other perspectives can be brought in Tasawwuf, for example, even in Fiqh. But we think the backbone for our Ihya Ilmul Kalam should be the epistemology. So I just would like to read some of my thoughts on this issue, and I hope my dear friend can bear with me. And we also today have a very fortunate to be with us, two of the most, I think, prominent or most advanced scholars in our present day on the issue of, on the field of Kalam. I think I do not need to introduce them because most of the people who come here already know the workshop itself, and also the scholar are going to give a keynote. The aim of the EC, KRM, and IKIM workshop series is to revive Kalam Epistemology as a platform for understanding, conceiving, evaluating, synthesizing, generating, and disseminating knowledge in the context of contemporary extreme ideologies, namely religious literalism, postmodern relativism, and secular rationalism. The long-established Kalam epistemology of reconciliation between reason and revelation could play a meaningful role in providing an alternative epistemology given the state of the crisis in the contemporary epistemology. By their community of practice own admission, contemporary epistemology is in a state of disarray. The dominant 20th century epistemological standpoint of the view from Norway have been opened up to the multiplicity of epistemological views from the margin. In comparison to contemporary 20th century epistemology, which is overwhelmingly dominated by foundationalist and coherentist approach in its quest for defining knowledge, oscillating between rationalism and idealism before transforming into full-fledged empiricism, Islamic epistemology in general and Kalam epistemology in particular tend to emphasize on the personal salvation, good virtues, and human-God relation in their epistemological adventure. Thus, it goes without saying that Kalam epistemology could not have the aims, outlook, and purpose similar to contemporary empiricist epistemology. However, Kalam epistemology engagement with foundationalist and coherentist epistemology is vital for the revival of a robust contemporary Kalam epistemology. Rather than simply dismiss contemporary epistemology as secular empiricist, we have to be a part of the contemporary conversation by learning to what a foundationalist or coherentist has to offer, thinking carefully about it, and then either agreeing or disagreeing by giving epistemological reason for why we do so. This is in fact the method of Kalam epistemology, which is ostensibly rational and analytic enterprise. The rise of post-positivist philosophy of science during the second half of the 20th century, which undermined the supremacy of empirical science as the only criterion for knowledge, has relegated contemporary empiricist epistemology into trivial venture. The sudden revival of religious epistemology, better known as reform epistemology, the growing interest in the virtue epistemology or intellectual virtues, and similarly the emergence of virtue ethics have all pointing toward the merit of reconnecting to a more traditional epistemology to fill the gap and to recover the missing element that constituted much of the 20th century epistemological work. Thus, we will also try to look into reform or virtue epistemology as they are adopted by other religious believing communities. Although the general approach to this epistemology sometimes is to downplay reason and emphasize spirituality and morality, it still has something to be learned by the analytical Kalam epistemology. In retrospective, the disarray state of contemporary epistemology could be attributed to the narrow and limiting ways of conceiving knowledge by the 20th century scholars working in the field of epistemology as a result of the positivistic and anti-metaphysical movement that dominated the 20th century knowledge enterprise. Thus, as we are entering the 21st century, it is just fitting that the present state of epistemology being addressed and deliberated in order to map the big picture of the current state of affairs with regard to our knowledge and its allied component. It is in this context of finding a viable option for the renewed and sustained approach to traditional religious epistemology that Kalam epistemology is selected. Why we choose Kalam? Kalam epistemology is perhaps the most indigenous, the most original, if not the more vivacious approach to knowledge within the main Islamic epistemological trend. Key concerns of Kalam epistemology include the human attainment of knowledge of God, the nature of God knowledge, the nature and structure of knowledge, the benchmark of knowledge and its limitation, the pursuit of truth and justice, the attribute of knowledgeable person, and the role and function of knowledgeable person. In line with the goal of the Islamic Analytic Theological Project, which Professor Dr. Aref now is leading, to directly evaluate the answer to well-defined epistemological questions, the workshop will deliberate particularities of Kalam epistemology and bringing them into engagement with particular modern epistemological understanding, either to evaluate the Kalam epistemology in light of the epistemological controversy around the modern issues, or to evaluate the epistemological question in light of the Kalam epistemology. That's basically our main purpose for this workshop. And by now, we try to identify our friends who work on this Kalam epistemology. So I think in EC, and with the help of KRM, we try to build a corpus of Kalam epistemology. For example, by now we have our MC. It's not just MC. She also a scholar. She wrote on Al-Maturidi epistemology. Yeah? And we have here Dr. Zaidi work on Al-Iji, also Al-Ghazali for sure. There's Dr. Farid working on Fakhruddin Al-Razi. Dr. Shamsuddin working on the sophist kind of issues. And we have several scholars that have a kind of here and there work on epistemology. But we need, I think now, the complete set of epistemological contribution by our Kalam scholar, right from maybe Abu Hanifah, Fiqh al-Akbar, epistemology, up to Imam Abu Hasan al-Sha'ari, al-Maturidi, al-Baqilani, al-Baghdadi, maybe right to Jurjani. So we need to build the corpus of their epistemology. So that basically the main purpose for our workshop. In this 2 days workshop, we already gathered, for example, 10 or 11 work on this aspect of epistemological by our mutakallimun. But in the long run, that's why our intention is to build a kind of community of epistemologists through what I call Kalam Epistemology Laboratory. The word maybe sound strange, but I believe we need to build a kind of epistemology laboratory for our Ihya al-Kalam bigger project. For example, for this Kuala Lumpur International Kalam Symposium, we have 3 days meeting with various events. Yesterday event in the museum, Islamic Art Museum, is meant for more general public or more general understanding of Kalam by 2 important keynote address. But today we should go more specific. We should go more detailed on the real issue of knowledge that we are facing now. If we already now agreed that the real problem of the Muslim today is a problem of knowledge, what we should do about this knowledge problem. And in EC, with the help of our professor and our colleague, we believe epistemology is the backbone, the foundation for our further understanding of the bigger picture of Ilmu Kalam. So with that hope, I really grateful today that all of you could come here, and I also would like to say my appreciation to Professor Datin Dr. Azizan for IKIM to be our consistent partner, very istiqamah with us from the first, and we hope to build a kind of permanent work on epistemology with IKIM. So EC and KRM and IKIM will become like the pillars for Kalam epistemology work in Malaysia, we hope. And we also would like to invite our colleagues from other institutions. Yeah, if you see in the poster or no poster, we have logo from our colleague from Indonesia. So what actually we want to build a community of epistemologists, and inshallah, I believe in the next few years, if we are istiqamah with this work, we can produce something meaningful to the ummah. So with that, I would like to thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Amran, for your welcoming speech, as well as having elucidating us on what Kalam epistemology is and its relevance in contemporary society of today, dispelling the myth that Islam is dogmatic. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Hamid Fahmi Zakashi, Deputy Director of Universitas Darussalam Gontor, Indonesia, for his welcoming speech. Tafadhal.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia Dato' Azizan Baharuddin, His Excellency Professor Dr. Aref Ali Naid, His Excellency Syekh Dr. Said Fauda, presenter from Malaysia and Indonesia for the first Kuala Lumpur International Kalam Symposium. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahilladzi ba'atsa fil ummiyyin rasulan minhum yatlu alaihim ayatihi ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. In this very precious occasion, I would like to extend my gratitude, especially to ISI, Islamic Strategic Studies Institute, which sometimes it was misspelled with ISIS. Very dangerous, but this is very intellectually very dangerous, inshallah. And Kalam Research and Media, Kalamun lil Buhus wal A'lam, for holding this very exclusive and excellent and precious symposium that might be the first in the Southeast Asia. The symposium which is very specific for a specific person. We call it in Sufi tradition, it is Khawasul Khawas, inshallah. And we already have our presentation of these papers last 2 months, and it is very fruitful for exchange the idea of how to appreciate our own tradition, especially in facing our current challenge of Islamic thought and civilization. And I would like to appreciate also Dr. Amran, who has chosen me to represent. He said to me, you have to represent the Muslim Ummah of Indonesia. Thank you, Dr. Amran. It is very, very great to me and too much, I think, to represent 200,000 million of Indonesian population. I just want to represent the Indonesian delegation. It's only 5, but they are representing universities and NGOs. One is from University of Ibn Khaldun, please, Dr. Tamam. Mr. Tamam, yeah. He is from a private university in Bogor, Indonesia. The other one is Dr. Hayy Al-Katani. He is also from Ibn Khaldun University. And my colleague, Dr. Khalid Muslih, he is from University of Darussalam, Gontor. He is specialized on Kalam, especially on Shia politics. And Dr. Shamsuddin Aref, he is the Executive Director of Institute for Islamic Thought and Civilization in Jakarta. And Adnin Armas, yes, he is the Executive Director of Young Muslim, the Council of Young Muslim Scholars of Indonesia. And me, myself, from the University of Darussalam. We thank you very much for this invitation, and we hope in the future there will be more people invited to present the specific and special issue on Kalam. And also I would like to propose in this occasion that this symposium should be developed into a scientific community, because we cannot build any discipline of knowledge of science unless we have a scientific community. We have already in all over the world the community who developed the Islamic economic. Everywhere people talking about Islamic economic, but nowhere people talking about Islamic epistemology. So we would like to start, and this very good start. We have to talk again and again about Islam in the sense of scientific, in the sense of epistemology. Because I believe that the dispute between the group of Islamic society, between Wahhabi and Ahlul Sunnah with Hizb ut-Tahrir with other group, because they are not at the level of scientific discussion. So we would like to bring this society as the leading society that solves the problem of dispute on the very simple and minor thing. You want to have a dispute in the higher level of intellectual, and this is the place and this is the group. And this is the first symposium that I would like to appreciate very much and hope it will be continuously developed in the future. But one thing I would like to propose for Professor Aref and Professor Dr. Said, that Kalam, if you accept my proposal, can be developed into what we call Islamic philosophy, if you don't mind, because when we trace what is discussed in Kalam, is many things about science. There are psychology, there is science, there are physics, they talk about knowledge, they talk about human being. Everything is talked in Kalam. So it is the same like philosophy in the very beginning, talking about universe, talking about man, talking about science, and so and so. And it becomes the mother of knowledge in Western civilization. The question is this: what is the mother of knowledge in Islamic civilization, if not Kalam? Because we don't accept falasifa as the mother of knowledge in Islamic civilization because it is foreign to Islam. We don't also accept fiqh as the mother of knowledge because fiqh is talking only about Islamic law. Kalam is talking everything, so I would like to propose, and I would like you to respond to this proposal, to bring Kalam into the name, a new name of our Islamic philosophy with our own tradition, and it developed from the Quranic understanding and hadith. And therefore, we should also make the community that develop Kalam in the sense of Islamic philosophy. And of course, there are people in Western civilization, especially the Orientalists, reject that there is no Islamic philosophy whatsoever in Islam. There is no Islamic philosophy. Philosophy is only the interpretation of Plato, Aristotle, and other Greek philosophy. Also from our own society, there are people, especially for fuqaha and muhaddisun, reject that there is no philosophy in Islam and philosophy is haram in Islam, especially logic and metaphysics, also Kalam. So in this predicament, we would like to solve the problem and improve that the name of Kalam should be justified as Islamic philosophy, and we have to develop some scientific concept from this Kalam and to present to the Islamic civilization, and hopefully it will be useful for developing not only Sharia, Aqidah and Sharia, but also developing Islamic science and Islamic civilization. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Fahmi, for the injection of the spirit to create and have, inshallah, an Islamic Epistemology Scientific Society. Now, I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia Professor Datin Dr. Azizan Baharuddin, the Director General of IKIM, to give her opening speech and officiate this workshop.
Thank you, Dr. Adila. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrahli sadri wa yassirli amri wa lul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Respectable guest speakers, Professor Dr. Aref Ali Naid from Libya in Dubai, Dr. Said Abdul Latif Huda from Jordan, Dr. Khalid Zuri from Morocco, inshallah, he will be with us tomorrow, Dr. Hamid Fahmi Zarkashi, Deputy Director Universitas Darussalam Gontor, Indonesia, my dear colleagues, Dr. Muhammad Zaidi Ismail of IKIM and Dr. Amran Muhammad of EC and KRM, learned paper presenters from both Indonesia and Malaysia. We hope in the future we will cover other countries as well. So it's just Malaysia and Indonesia today, right? So inshallah we will have colleagues from other countries later in the future. respected guests, fellow scholars, participants, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, we are indeed very grateful to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for enabling us to convene in this second workshop on Kalam Epistemology to seriously deliberate on the theme Reason and Revelation in the Age of Extremes. As co-organizer of today's workshop with both Kalam Research and Media, KRM, and the Islamic and Strategic Studies Institute, ISI, and on behalf of the Institute for Islamic Understanding Malaysia, I wish to humbly welcome all of you to IKIM today. We would also like to place on record our appreciation to all those who have made it possible for the workshop to take place, i.e. our speakers, paper presenters, participants, organizing colleagues, as well as collaborators and co-organizers. We hope in the future the family of co-organizers and collaborators will expand in number. Truly we would like Kalam to be something that is of relevance to each and every Muslim in the Nusantara, in the world. And I was just expressing to Dr. Amran, I personally, for example, have to face many a time non-Muslim audiences. And if Allah wills it, inshallah we will share this kalam with the whole of humanity. I think there's nobody stopping us to think like that. And that is what Islam is all about. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is rahmatan lil alamin. So when are we going to put that into practice? Inshallah, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, I'm indeed glad to share with you that in 2014, IKIM was able to publish the book entitled Islamic Scientific Tradition in History. This is an important work of approximately 600 pages, resulting from a historical philosophical research of almost 2 decades by the Turkish philosopher scholar, Professor Alparslan Acijenk. I was made to understand that nearly 20 years ago, both Professor Acijenk and Professor Aref Ali Nayed were together at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, while serving as professors there under the directorship of Professor Said Muhammad Nagib Al-Atas. However, what is of special interest to us in the context of our present workshop is that Professor Acijenk, in the aforementioned work of his, regards Kalam as a science of philosophy in Islam. To quote him, Kalam, according to its historical subject matter, is the study of systems or system-related problems, but only within the Islamic context. Thus, we can conclude that Kalam is philosophy, peculiar to the worldview of Islam, which is its general framework, and as such, it deserves the name Islamic philosophy. So this was what our colleague mentioned just now. I think we already have the precedence to that thought. So, having published this important work 2 years ago, which posits Kalam as Islamic philosophy, we are grateful to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala that this year, IKIM is able to closely collaborate with parties that seek to promote it. We are also very happy that the inaugural workshop on Kalam Epistemology, which was held at IKIM on January 27th, is now followed by our present 2-day workshop, which is being co-organized, as you know, by KRM, ISI, and IKIM in collaboration with INSIS Jakarta, UNIDA, Gontor, MIUMI, UIKA, Bogor, all from Indonesia, and Sentra, Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, as someone who has for a long while been very much concerned with the Malaysian Muslims' poor performance in, as well as mastery of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, I think it's not just my concern, I think it's the concern of all of us sitting on the stage now. Better known as STEM, yeah? STEM, S-T-E-M, Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics. I'm indeed pleased to learn from my colleagues at IKIM that Kalam, as a discipline, has been essentially and historically about helping us to know well the Creator from our proper knowledge of the creation. I'm glad in the former speech before mine, the word science was mentioned many times. And I think it's a misunderstood word among some Muslims. Some Muslims think that science is of Western origin. It's the creation of the West. No, it's not. True science actually came from the bosom of Islam. In our view, science as well as its allies in technology, engineering and mathematics, if properly understood and nurtured, is to a large extent about us knowing the world of creation correctly, treating it well and properly benefiting from it. As such, much good is to be expected from continual interactions between those trained in Kalam and those specializing in STEM. As I speak, I think of many colleagues, some of them are vice-chancellors of engineering universities. There's one vice-chancellor of University Technology Petronas in Perak. I think he would have loved to be in your presence today. So I hope Dr. Amran will think of bringing some of these colleagues in our gathering in the future, because of their own training, they didn't have opportunity, but I think they can resonate with what Kalam is trying to do, and I think they are in the position to make changes on the ground. We are also talking about how to bring Kalam or Islamic philosophy into the curriculum of some of our universities, especially those that actually have specific faculties of Islamic studies, Professor. On that score, I'm also pleased to be informed that one of KRM's previous publications, which is still available online, was by Professor Nidal Gusson, an astrophysicist, whose writing is aptly titled Kalam's Engagement with Modern Science. I hope that more works of this kind shall come out from such programs as the one in which we are presently convening. And I hope that what KRM is doing will become more commonplace, more common knowledge. I think it's still exotic what you're trying to do in the minds of a lot of people. When people listen to the word epistemology, they have a blackout. They have a mental blackout. So I think it's high time we somehow enculturate and make people feel that there's nothing to be feared. You know, it is something as basic as oxygen and blood in your body. Seriously, this is blood and oxygen for your brain, for your heart, for your soul. So I hope we will work with colleagues in the media. And for a start, I think IKIM's TV and Director of Media Center, Professor Dr. Nik Uskiman, inshallah Professor one day, has just stepped into the room. We will play a critical role in spreading this knowledge in the popular media. Dr. Nik, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that the few points which I've just shared with you shall be of benefit, in addition to what all of us will soon gain from the discussion sessions throughout this two-day program. With all the various themes and subjects to be scrutinized and deliberated in this program by our guest scholars, paper presenters, and your learned selves, I sincerely hope that the workshop will achieve its aims and objectives, inshallah. Once again, I would like to sincerely thank all parties who have contributed. Dr. Adila in particular, she's the MC, she's a scholar, she's a lot of things, I'm sure, for this workshop, directly or indirectly to the success of the discourse. With the sacred words, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I therefore declare open the second workshop on Kalam Epistemology. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Azizan, for the opening speech that highlights the role of IKIM in strengthening the understanding and the practice of Islam, at the same time recognizing the importance of Kalam Epistemology in this ever-changing society and its close link with science, which shows that it has been a tradition of the Muslim scientists, philosophers, and of course, mutakallimun in general. This marks the end of the first section, or the first segment of our workshop with the opening ceremony. And hence I can be more relaxed. For your information, Professor, I don't know which one is first, to present a paper or to be an MC. But for me to be an MC is just as exhausting, if not more exhausting, than presenting a paper. So with this, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Aref, my learned professor, respected honorable professor, to lead the next segment, which the keynote addresses with his first keynote. I want to claim that he was my professor. he just half a minute while he gets ready. When I asked him what assignment I had to do for his course, which unfortunately I've forgotten the course title, but I will never forget the assignment which I had to do. He found out from Professor Bilal that I could translate from Arabic to English. And he said, okay, I want you to translate this article of Al-Qaisari on Ad-Dahr. And I kept telling him, Prof, my Arabic is terrible, I cannot do it. He said, no, do this. So I translated it. He left. I emailed my translation to be assessed. I read my translation. I emailed to Professor Aref, Prof, I don't understand what I wrote. So if I have to translate again, please do inform me. It took me a year to have the courage to check my grade, and you gave me an A+. Tafadhal.
Well, he deserved it. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Professor Datin Dr. Azizan Bahruddin, Director General of IKEEN, Sayyidi Sheikh Al-Allama, Sayyidi Saeed Foda, distinguished scholars and guests and participants. Let me just start by saying something about Kalam and philosophy, which was raised by our distinguished dean from University Dar es Salaam, Sheikh Mustafa Abdul Raziq and Sidi Saeed Nashar, long ago in Egypt, actually in their search for a response to the Orientalists' claim that there was no philosophy in Islam, said that the philosophy of Islam is Kalam. So this contention that Kalam is Islam's philosophy, basically, is actually a well-established position that was popular in the 1940s and 50s in Egypt, and has actually been again and again re-emphasized by several people, including my dear beloved friend Al-Barsalan, who was my colleague at ISTAC, under the able leadership of Sayyidi Sheikh Al-Allama, Sayyid Muhammad Naqib Al-Attas, Hafidahullah wa ra'ah. I would just like to start with some general remarks. And bear with me, because these general remarks will be kind of a little bit speculative. But I believe that they are important, because while I look forward very much to listening to all these scholarly papers that we will get to hear from you about the epistemology in that scholar, epistemology in that other scholar, I would just like to tell you personally where I think there is gold, okay? The Americans have this expression, there is gold in them hills, okay? So certain hills, they think there are gold in them. And I have certain suspicions about some gold being in certain places in the terrain of Muslim tradition. And because I'm getting older and more and more tired and more busy with dunya, I would like to tell you about these hills, just in case some of you would like to get excited about some of these hills and go and dig there, because I think you are more able than me to actually extract this gold. So I'm just going to tell you about some of these, let's call them nodes, where you can find some really useful things for our project. So bear with me if this is more like the dreamy speculation of someone who is kind of longing for something that he doesn't have, more than something that I've actually captured. Okay? And let me start like this. In every case where a Muslim mutakallim has written a massive work on Kalam, there is always a massive introduction that is of an epistemic nature, okay? That talks about ilm and what it means, and its sources, and its ramifications, and its hierarchy. These introductions are very important hills where you will find a lot of gold. And this is not limited to Ash'ari and Maturidi mutakallimun, but also to the Mu'tazilites. Al-Mughni of Al-Qadi Abd al-Jabbar has a massive introduction on knowledge. Okay? And there is definitely a lot of gold in them hills. However, I would also like you to make sure when you dig for that goal to free your mind from too simplistic translations. For example, when you see the word ilm, just don't just do knowledge, okay? When you see the word ma'rifah, you need to really look at the words very, very carefully. And you need to do something which I think is very important. You need to reactivate the words. What happened to the Arabic language is very interesting. Many of our words have become things, while in fact they were indicative of activities. Such words as aql are now seen as a noun, while aql is actually a verb. Aqala is to actually, aql is the doing of something. Put an ing wherever you find any of these epistemic terms, because when you do that, you unleash these words in a very important way. If you think of aql as a thing or even as a faculty, you're missing out on a lot. قلوب يعقلون بها لا يعقلون بها. Okay? The qalb and the aql have an interesting relationship of a kind of a faculty to the activity of the faculty. And when I say this, we're already connecting the qalb with this activity of cognition, intellection, knowing, consideration. All of those words are actually in the semantic field of aql. When we say ilm, that's also a fi'l. Okay? Okay, what fi'l is that? And whose fi'l is it? It is a ta'arruf from Allah Azza wa Jal that enables you as a Aref to have that ilm. That's extremely important. For the Asha'ira, the ilm is not your doing. It is only your kasb. And the one who's actually doing the khalq of that ilm is Allah Azza wa Jal. That is already an incredibly different foundation from much of what goes by the name of epistemology in the Western tradition. Already there is divine complicity in the very activity of knowing or coming to know. That's extremely important not to lose out. It is not your doing. It's actually Allah's doing with your kind of participation that we call kasb, whatever that means. As the mashayikh used to say when something was very strange and difficult to understand, أَدَقُّ مِنْ كَسْبِ الْأَشَاعِرَةِ, they say. It is more refined and subtle than the kasb of the Asha'ira. Okay? So it's but this notion of ilm as kasb is very important. So there is gold in the reactivation of epistemic terms that you can find in the introductions to the great manuals of Kalam. Second point about the hills. These hills differ in different stages. And an introduction to an Ash'ari work, let us say at the hands of Baqillani, rahmatullahi alayh, are different than introductions from a later stage, as in the works of Imam Sanusi, for example. And the reason for that is because there is a richer and richer consideration of multiple dimensions of knowing. Okay? Be flexible. Do not get fixated on the Kalam epistemology, because there are multitudes of epistemologies in Kalam. And there are also developments in epistemologies of even the same scholar, so that in an earlier work of Imam Ghazali, you might find something a bit different than in a later work of Imam Ghazali. Be flexible and let your mind and soul float enough and be agile enough to see these variations, because you should not get too fixated. A third point about these hills that have much gold. In order to actually unleash much of the insight about these things, sometimes, and you should not apologize for this, you need tools and abilities that are acquired from studying non-Muslim things, Western things, for example. For example, I believe that the reading of Franz Brentano in his work on psychology from an empirical point of view, or the reading of the Cartesian Meditations of Edmund Husserl, or the readings of Ludwig Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations, or the readings of Hans-Georg Gadamer's Wahrheit und Methode, or Truth and Method, sometimes actually give you tools for appreciating what's out there. Further works that are extremely important for, I think, a Muslim trying to pursue this epistemology are the massive works of Charles Sanders Peirce and the pragmatic tradition, including James and including Dewey, with his theory of inquiry and logic of inquiry. Because much of what the mashayikh were talking about is not just about propositional knowing, but is actually about coming to know, about the process of inquiry. So do not shy away from using these tools, and also tools like the logic of question and answer. Not only the earlier versions developed by people like R.G. Collingwood in his autobiography and in his book Essays on Metaphysics, but also later works like Hentika's work on oracular knowledge and the logic of question and answer. The reason I am invoking these Western names is because of the phenomenon which we can call cultural amnesia that happens to civilizations. Sometimes, like a man who's hit by a car, we go into shock and trauma and we become forgetful of things in our own tradition. Sometimes we forget how to read our tradition. Even though we have the books, we are sometimes unable to actually realize how rich these books are. For example, when I looked at another in Imam Baqillani, rahmatullahi alayh, I used to think, just another, so I read it just another, Like any Arab, modern Arabs, we are very guilty of this. We think that we know the Arabic language, which we don't, okay? So we actually read the word ta'arruf in Ibn Atallah Secondary, and I think it's like ta'arruf, ta'arraft alayk, ta'arraft ala fulan. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with self-disclosure of Allah Azza wa Jal himself. It's a kind of a tajalli, ta'arruf, okay? So when I looked at Nadar in Baqillani in a mundane way, it was rather boring. You go through the few pages on Nadar in Al-Insaf, or Kitab al-Hurra, or the beginning of a Tamheed, and you can just skim through it in actually less than half an hour. You can go through the section on Nadar. But when I began to look with the question, is Baqillani talking about phenomenological seeing of the type that Edmund Husserl was trying to get at in his not only Cartesian Meditations, but especially later books like The Crisis of the European Sciences? Is Baqillani trying to do something like the seeing of semiosis that Peirce was talking about? Is it a consideration of signs? Is it ayat that he's talking about? Are ayat just signs, or they operative signs that are actually a lot more active than just just indicators, as in the case of Peirce? Is Baqillani trying to do something like the intentional seeing that Franz Brentano was talking about? And when you begin to ask these questions, you can find that in Baqillani there is that and more. And you begin to consider the real meanings of the word nadar, and you will find that in Baqillani, nadar is not just thinking. It is not just cognition. It has to do with a whole bunch of things. And let me tell you what I think it means in Baqillani, okay? It simultaneously means nadar as in considering, okay? Looking at. But it also is nadar in the sense of waiting. And the Arabic actually allows that. It is nadar as in a receptivity, a kind of humble standing before the thing to show itself. That is also nadar. It is also nadar in the sense of kind of approaching something with kindness, with a kind of gentleness. That's also in the Arabic word nazar. I truly believe the Imam has all of those in mind. Why do I say that? Because if you read carefully, you will not find an Aristotelian approach with an Aristotelian kind of logic in Baqillani. You will find a logic that looks more like the Stoics, more Epicurean, more semiotic. It looks more like the logic of Augustinus in his book, De Doctrina Christiana. It looks more like Peirce in many ways. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is, as we look through these books, don't just translate the word nazar as knowledge and that's it, because when you make it knowledge, you already have thingified it, reified it. You've actually made it into a thing, knowledge, body of knowledge. Okay? It's not like that. It's actually an activity of seeing, of considering, of waiting, of being patiently in anticipation. It's a directedness towards the thing. It is a receptivity towards the thing. It's a humility before the thing. Where is Baqillani getting all this? The Quran and the Sunnah. Because if you want the real hermeneutic key to the Quran and the Sunnah, it is in the Quran and the Sunnah. And the hermeneutic key to the Quran and the Sunnah is fundamentally about the appreciation and the uptake, to use a term used by Austin in his theory of speech act. He calls it uptake of the speech act. It's the uptake of the ayat. And these ayat actually are all over the place. They lurk. They are in your nafs, in the anfus, in your soul. They are in the afaq. And when they are in the afaq, they don't appear as mere points. The tree grabs your attention. And the bird, when it flies just before you, actually takes all your emotions. And the flower does something to your heart. These ayat are lurking with activity. And because we are not min ahl al-taba'i', because we are Ash'arite, we are not like Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi who thinks that the tabi'ah lurks in the thing itself. We are actually very open to the idea that all of this is a continuous creativity of Allah Azza wa Jal Himself. That there is an ijad that is happening every moment. That the khalq is mutajaddid. And that as you are doing the nazar towards these ayat, you are basically in humility receiving gifts from Allah Azza wa Jal. And that is fundamental. Baqillani's nazar is about the approaching of a generosity from Allah Azza wa Jal. It is said that Ibn Rushd al-Hafid once was wondering about a man called the Sabti. He's one of the Rijal al-Sab'a who are buried in Marrakesh, who was a great wali. And Ibn Rushd kept hearing of this wali whose prayers are answered all the time. So he sent a student of his to spy on Sabti, to check what is the secret of Sabti. Is it because he does a lot of salat? Is it because he does a lot of tilawah? And then the student, after many months of study, came back. And he said, you know, the Sabti doesn't have that many great ibadat and so on. But a Sabti, whenever somebody asks for anything, gives a sadaqah, and then does dua. And it happens. So Ibn Rushd said, and this is in one of the books of Tabaqat, At-Tashawuf, لمذهب أهل التصوف. It says that Ibn Rushd said to the student, ذلك رجل, that's a man, عرف أن الوجود ينفعل بالجود. الوجود ينفعل بالجود. The connectivity between generosity, divine generosity, and being is extremely important. It is not the case that being as such is just a pure category. Being is actually a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal. It is the imdad of Allah Azza wa Jal that sustains being, and it is the khalq of Allah Azza wa Jal that makes being in the first place. If being is a process of gifting, and nazar is the receiving of gifts, The epistemology of Kalam is completely different than what we think of as when we think of epistemology. It's not analytic philosophy. And it is not just theories of knowledge. It actually has to do with attitudinal matters. It has to do with worshipfulness. It has to do with prayerful attitude. It has to do with the humility before a giving and generous Lord and God, Creator, called Allah Azza wa Jal. It is an attitude of humbly receiving gifts and humbly giving thanks. So shukr, gratitude, is no longer something that we do in ethics. It's actually something we do in epistemology itself. Because if you do shukr, you get more. And if you don't do shukr, that is kufr, by the way. In Arabic, the opposite of shukr is kufr. In the Quran, the opposite of shukr is kufr. Kufran in ni'mah is to deny and to be ungrateful. Okay? Imma shakiran wa imma kafura. So it is, gratitude is actually epistemically significant. The more gratitude you have, the more receptivity you will have, the more giving will be given to you, the more knowledge you'll have. What I'm trying to say is, if you want to find the gold, free your mind of some of the common things we just learned from epistemology courses. Open yourself up to categories of understanding that are a lot broader. And I think the way to do that is through much discussion, much dialogue, not just with our own tradition, but with everyone else's tradition. And dialogue with the creatures of Allah Azza wa Jal. Think how strange it is that you can actually see the flower in the garden. I mean, what is it between the being of this flower and your being that is so connected that you get to see it? What's so special about you that this flower will say to you, here I am? This presentment of the universe to you is a gift. How is this connection happening between the mind and being? That is a fundamental issue in Kalam, as Sidi Saeed Foda was explaining. The epistemic, amazing, strange thing about epistemology, the epistemic mystery, is the fact that we know in the first place that there is a connection between being and mind. Aristotle wondered about this. To'on, being, and nous. How does that connect? In the Nicomachean Ethics, in Book 10, Aristotle says that it's about theoria. Okay? And he makes a distinction between theoria, praxis, which is doing, and poiesis. But ultimately, Aristotle himself discovered that theoria, praxis, and poiesis, or making, are all the same. Actually, they're dimensions of the same human activity. Nazar for Baqillani, ilm for Imam Ghazali in Kitab al-Ihya, in Kitab al-Ilm in the beginning of al-Rub' al-Awwal of Kitab al-Ihya, Fahm al-Quran in Imam Muhasibi's books, the Ma'rifa that Abu Talib al-Makki spoke about in the Qut al-Qulub, the ilm that Qushayri spoke about in his Risala, are all extremely rich areas that not only Muslims need today, but humanity needs. And it is our task as Muslims to not only get to know these gifts, but to give them to the world. Because we did not come to the world in order to destroy people as ISIS is doing. Our purpose in the world is to be khuddam to humanity, to serve it with humility and with compassion. Thank you very much for your patience and forgive me for taking so long. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Professor. Can I open the session for Q&A? Do I have a go from Dr. Amran? Yes?
Can I at least take two before we go for our break, please? Anybody? Before I monopolize the Q&A. Why everybody wants? Okay, yes, Dr. Megawati, please.
Prof. Aref, I want to know what's your position on making Kalam as Islamic philosophy officially, because we know that in that's in relation to our intellectual tradition, that there are 3 distinct schools. Kalam, Falsafa, which became Hikmah later, and Ma'rifah. So, isn't it, in a sense, you want to reform something, but you're changing history itself? And I think that would be damaging, just to fit in with the Western conception of having philosophy.
Yeah. Bismillah. I think you can know my answer by the name of our institution, which is Kalam Research and Media. Okay. And I would like to say 2 things about this name. First, about the Kalam philosophy thing. Our mashayikh have taught us that لا مشاحة في الاصطلاح. You know, when it comes to terminology, we shouldn't be too hung up on the words to the point where we actually create a kind of an empty fight. The word philosophy, from philosophia, the love of wisdom, is an ancient word. It became translated, or actually just transcribed, as falsafa. And our mashayikh used falsafa to designate basically the tradition of al-Kindi, Farabi, Ibn Hindu, Ibn Sina, and that line. So usually when I say falsafa, that's what I stick to that usage. But there is a broader way of conceiving of philosophy, which is how now, for example, people say philosophy in general. Okay? If we mean by it reflection, the reflective life, reflection on being and about humanity and so on, that's a more generic use of the word philosophy. I think our dear distinguished dean and professor, when he was saying, is it Islamic philosophy, he meant it in that sense of broad wonderment about the world, consideration about the world. I myself prefer to just stick with Kalam and to rehabilitate it, meaning Taftazani rahmatullahi alayh, in his Sharh al-Maqasid, and also in the Sharh al-Aqidah al-Nasafiyya, speaks about why Kalam is called Kalam and gives various reasons. I think those reasons are not just important historically, that in fact those were the reasons it was called Kalam, but they are actually indicative of dimensions of Kalam that are very important. For example, nowadays people talk about narrative. I think that's already included in Kalam. Nowadays people talk about discourse and discourse analysis. That is already included in Kalam. Habermas and the Frankfurt School speak about communicative action. That's already included in Kalam. Austin speaks about speech act theory. That's already included in the notion of Kalam, because Kalam is to actually make an effect, okay? So what I'm trying to say is the word Kalam is not as limiting as some people think it is. It's actually broader, massively important. And I believe that it's definitely worthy of not only keeping, but insist on it myself. At the same time, if somebody wants to say that Kalam is philosophy in the general way, yes. Is it falsafa in the Abyssinian way? No, it's not. Okay? So terminology is always like that. It's a bit problematic. But we call it Kalam. And by the way, second thing I want to say about Kalam is, and I see that Suhail is running away. Kalam, when we established the institute, I wanted to call it Kalam Research and Media. And Suhail said, no, let's just call it Kalam Research. Why this media thing? We're not into TV. And I am so honored and pleased that this is IKEEM.FM. Okay? If we cannot communicate what we're about to the public at large, if we cannot reach the school kids and the housewives and the drivers in the street and the traffic jam, and if we cannot reach the bureaucrats and we cannot reach the doctors and the lawyers, then we have not succeeded. To just have an ivory tower kind of Kalam is not what we're about, okay? So media is extremely important, and I'm so happy that some of media's leaders are here with us, okay? So these are the 2 points I wanted to say in reply. So forgive me, Doctor, if I took too long. No.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Zaidi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Alaikum
barakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Aref. I seldom ask questions in IKIM seminar. I would like to share with you that one of IKIM TOR, terms of reference, is to engage non-Muslims in dialogues. And actually, we are specifically tasked by the government to take the lead in this. So, having been into this business of having interfaith dialogue, perhaps intra-faith dialogues, what are the points perhaps that you can share from your own experience which can be helpful to organizations like IKIM in carrying out this important task?
5 points. Point number 1, do not be shy or ashamed of interfaith dialogue because it is a sunnah, Nabawiyya Sharifa. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had dialogue in his own mosque with the Nasara of Najran and allowed them to pray in his own mosque. So anybody who tells you that interfaith is somehow un-Islamic or anti-Islamic or is trying to destroy Islam does not know the sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had interfaith dialogue already. The Sahaba did, and the interfaith relations go way back to the Sunnah Nabawiyya Sharifa and the amal of Sahabat Rasulullah radiyallahu anhum ajma'een, including the Uhda Umariyya that is famous. I don't want to go into the history of that. That's the first point. Second point is that Muslims, generation after generation, in every single generation, not only engaged in interfaith dialogue, but actually developed interfaith dialogue in massively important ways. Okay? And the writings on interfaith dialogue in Islam are well established all the way back. Even Ibn Taymiyyah, and this is something you should remind the Salafis of, has a 2-volume work on interfaith dialogue, okay? And has some important fatwas regarding the treatment of people of other religions that Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya made a special conference on in Mardin, which I had the honor of attending. Okay? The third point, which is extremely important, to develop kalam and to develop intellectually and to develop reflectively and to develop humanistically requires interfaith from the beginning, not as an afterthought. And that is something that Imam Maturidi knew, and Kitab al-Tawheed is full of interfaith. He discusses, there is a rad ala al-Nasara, ala al-Yahud, ala al-Thanawiyya, ala even munkiri al-haqa'iq, okay? Even the skeptics and the atheists, okay? And that's the case with all the great Imams. Imam Ash'ari himself, Imam Baqillani actually traveled to Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, and actually debated and discussed with the Christians there, as well as debating with the philosophers. In Andalusia and Andalus, it was even more prominent. The books of Andalusian scholars, even the fuqaha, even the Mi'yar of Wansharisi, or the books of Ibn Rushd al-Jadd, not the Hafid, are actually like al-Muqaddimat al-Mumahidat, are full of interfaith insights and elaborations. And when people do this interfaith discussion, it actually becomes constitutive of kalam and of thinking and because it's qila wa qalu. You cannot do kalam in a silo. You cannot do it in a monologue. It is dialogical in its very essence, because it's about discussion, it's about give and take, it's about consideration jointly, it's about co-theologizing, doing theology together. Okay, so that is was that the third point? Yeah. Okay. Now the fourth point is to be aware that you should not reinvent the wheel. Meaning, there has been, at least since the 1960s, hundreds, I would say thousands, of interfaith meetings and gatherings and initiatives and institutions, and you need to be aware of all those so that you just don't repeat the same, because people come to interfaith and they just want to repeat the same conferences again and again. And the fifth is to avoid the phenomenon of interfaith professionals, people who are just going jet-setting from one conference to another interfaith, who keep repeating the same thing. You need people who are genuinely engaged in real theology at a very deep level. And we know a whole bunch of these people that we can point you to because we've been doing this, Suhail and I. Suhail has 2 master's degrees, one in Catholic theology and one in Protestant theology, and he's a Muslim, alhamdulillah. So he's an expert in this area, and we've developed deep friendships with people like David Ford and Peter Oakes and Miroslav Wolf that are really deep, very deep theological relationships. Jordan has done tremendous work in this, with not only amongst Muslims with the Amman message, but with the Common Word Initiative, and can set an example for how to go about this. So try to engage all that. So these are the, I think I finished the 5 points, right? Alhamdulillah. Sorry.
Okay, I have received, I think we can
Yes.
rest. Thank you, yes. No, we can rest now.
We will go for a break of about 20 minutes. And but before that, just to recap, the message from the first keynote, which Professor Aref gave, is that he reminds us that Kalam is not limited, but is actually an expansive body of knowledge that's full of theories, concepts that are fundamentally connected with Allah and His Prophet ﷺ. But most importantly, it must be communicated and disseminated to the society by engaging with contemporary society, by knowing and understanding fully well the situation. Meaning to say, we have to be the master of the past as well as the present in order to be more effective in dissemination of knowledge or sciences of Kalam. So with that, we will take a break of about 20 minutes for tea, and then we will come back for the second keynote. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.